Incredible, touching transformation. Millionaire's son discovers his sight after a black maid's awakening to truth. Ethan Cooper sat in his luxurious study, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the leather-bound tomes on the shelves. Yet, amidst the opulence, a gnawing emptiness tugged at him, a hollowness that the finest silk suits and the most extravagant parties couldn't fill. At 22, he was set to graduate with honors from a top-tier business school purely because of his last name. But wealth had left him blind. He shifted uneasily in his chair, frustrations brewing with every clang of the clock ticking away the seconds of his life. 6 weeks earlier, he'd met Grace, the maid. The friendship had sparked unexpectedly. She had a way of cutting through the layers of his privilege. In moments together, lost amid the polish of his family's estate, he began to understand the burden she carried and the lessons she imparted. Yet he found himself tethered to the opulent life he had known, conflicted between loyalty to his family's legacy and the burgeoning truth he felt in Grace's presence. Was he becoming a stranger to his own skin? "Ethan," Grace had said one afternoon while folding crisp linens in the vast, dimly lit laundry room, "you have the power to change things, but it starts with how you see people." The weight of her words lingered. He hesitated, wrestling with a rising panic. What if she was right? Did the invisible walls of privilege that defined his world also blind him to the larger narrative of existence? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Conflicting emotions surged within him, each more potent than the last. Doubt gripped him, making his breath shallow. What would it mean to abandon the beliefs that had been drilled into him? As he combed through memories of family gatherings, he recoiled at the casual prejudices splashed among laughter and toasts. Each revelation deepened his agony. Could he really confront his family, put their hidden transgressions on trial? The thought of their disappointment weighed heavy. It clawed at his gut. The echoes of last night's dinner party still lingered. A condescending joke shot across the table, met with laughter from his father. Ethan's mouth had gone dry as he glanced at Grace, who was clearing plates in the kitchen, her back turned as the laughter continued. In that moment, clarity broke upon him like dawn.
His heart raced. Thoughts spiraled. He had a decision to make. Would he step into the light of understanding, or be yet another blind heir, preserved in the darkness of his family's biases? Just then the phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. A message from his father. A family crisis loomed. "Ethan, we need to talk. Now." His heart sank. All that clarity, all that questioning was about to be thrust into chaos. Would he be forced to choose sides when the storm hit? It felt inevitable. As he stood up, his legs trembled. Dread surged through his veins, and the world shifted beneath him. In that moment, he stood at a precipice, the weight of a decision crushing down, a choice that could redefine everything he believed in. Would he embrace the catalyzing spark of change, or retreat into the shadows, hiding from the truths threatening to upend his world? The air crackled with tension, leaving questions swirling unanswered, dangling like a thread waiting for a sharp tug that could unravel it all. Ethan took a deep breath before stepping out of his study and into the corridor, the walls adorned with family portraits that had silently witnessed generations of privilege. Each frame felt heavier now, bearing witness to a reality he was beginning to question. The weight of his name, which had once felt like a crown, now suffocated him. As he approached the living room, he felt an internal shift. The confidence instilled in him by his family was starkly at odds with the burgeoning empathy he sought to cultivate. His father stood by the fireplace, silhouette sharp against the crackling flames. The tension in the air was palpable, a thick fog obscuring the warmth of familial connection. "Ethan," his father started, his voice even but laced with urgency. "There's trouble at the firm. We need to address this swiftly. You know how these discussions can impact our legacy." Ethan nodded, forcing himself into the expected role of dutiful son and heir, though inside a storm raged. He wanted to say something, to challenge the toxic undercurrents that flowed through their discussions, but the words felt trapped, caught in a web of expectation and fear. "What kind of trouble?" he managed to ask, his voice steady in a bid to disguise his swirling emotions. "The board is unhappy with how we've been managing our community relations.
They think their investments are at risk if we don't present a better image to the public. Each word from his father's mouth felt like a direct strike at the budding ideals Ethan had recently begun to embrace. As his father outlined the strategies they would use to navigate the impending backlash, Ethan's thoughts drifted back to Grace, the conversations that had ignited a fire within him. She had pointed out that true change came not from optics, but from the authentic connections they forged with others. The stark contrast between Grace's wisdom and the corporate strategies being discussed made his skin prickle.
The meeting transitioned into a discussion about how to spin the narrative in the media, how to shift the blame from themselves to external factors. Ethan felt cold fury bubble within, the realization that rather than addressing systemic issues, his family intended to mask them, to keep their empire protected, even at the cost of their integrity. "Dad, what about the people we heard along the way? Wouldn't it make more sense to reach out positively rather than merely reacting?" The words slipped out before he could rein them in, shock rippling through the room. "What are you suggesting?" Ethan's father's tone darkened, a quick glance at Ethan warning that he was treading into dangerous territory. The glimmer of disappointment in his eyes pierced through Ethan, but he pressed on. "I'm suggesting we invest in genuine community efforts. Show them we care rather than just protecting our reputation," he replied, his voice gaining a firmness he didn't know he possessed. "Do you really think that will fix anything?" his father retorted, incredulity coloring his expression. "This is business, Ethan. You can't let idealism jeopardize our standing." The frustration gnawed at Ethan's insides, but something deeper stood within him now, a sense of purpose. He had seen through the veil of his upbringing, and it filled him with a newfound determination. "You're right, this is business, but that doesn't mean we can ignore the consequences of our actions. I want to be part of a solution, not just a Band-Aid." His father's jaw clenched. "Watch your tone." Ethan's own resolve solidified against the intimidation. He realized it was time to confront not just his father, but the very values that encapsulated his family's identity. What had initially begun as a curiosity about the world beyond his privilege had exploded into a mission. As the tension swelled like a coiled spring ready to snap, Ethan could feel the stakes rising. It was no longer just about business, it was about principles. He was standing at the intersection between loyalty and moral responsibility, realizing he might have to risk everything, his family's approval, his inheritance, perhaps even his safety, to embrace the change brewing inside him. Just as the silence threatened to break, a thought struck him like a thunderbolt. How far was he willing to go in the pursuit of truth? The answer wrapped around him, filling him with both dread and exhilaration. The family crisis was merely a precursor to a deeper awakening, an impending confrontation with the ghosts of his past. But in that pivotal moment, he felt a new horizon unfold, the first steps toward a future where he truly saw the injustices around him and stood against them. Would he have the courage to act when it mattered most? The moment of truth was fast approaching. Ethan stepped back from the confrontation, his heart racing as he found himself grappling with the potency of his voice. He had just crossed a line that existed not only between him and his father, but also between the inherited expectations of his family and the emerging values he held dear. The walls of the living room felt like they were closing in on him, each portrait leering with the weight of legacy he was beginning to challenge. "Let me remind you, Ethan," his father seethed softly, his expression harsh. "A legacy is built on resilience, not sentimentality. If you think getting closer to those people will somehow mend our reputation, you're sorely mistaken." Ethan stood firm, an urge to flee warring with a newfound clarity. He realized that his father's vision was narrow, entangled with power and status, while his own was expansive and grounded. Each word exchanged acted like a mirror reflecting not just the man before him, but the man he wished to become. "Dad, why can't resilience be built through accountability and understanding? What's the point of our wealth if it only serves to distance us from those who need support?" His father's silence echoed loudly, a pause that felt pregnant with unspoken words. Ethan seized the moment, recognizing that the fissures in their dynamic were giving way to an opportunity. "I've met people who are struggling disproportionately, and I can't unsee their pain. Manages their suffering briefly with clever strategy will do nothing." "Enough," his father thundered, the anger flooding back through the room. "You're naive if you think vulnerability is a strength." Ethan swallowed hard, the sting of rejection raising doubt once more, but he quickly regained composure. It was crucial to press forward. "I know it might seem that way to you, but being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's honesty. Isn't that what you taught me, to be a man of your word?" His father's expression darkened further, but inside Ethan sensed a shift,
a fraying in the tightly held beliefs that formed the bedrock of his father's worldview. The metaphorical chasm between them had the potential to bridge rather than widen. "Look," Ethan continued, intensity threading through his voice, "I'm not asking us to give away everything, but we can take steps toward genuine remorse and action. Wouldn't it be better to reshape our legacy so it's built on something empowering and authentic? It isn't just about protecting what we built from the past, it's about hoping for something greater in the future." The room fell still, the crackle of the fireplace weaving an uncomfortable tapestry of silence. As the flames flickered, so too did the facade Ethan's father crafted so carefully. Nothing lay more naked than his son's unwavering gaze, holding him accountable like no board member ever could. Ethan took a breath, each second stretching painfully. Here was his moment. This was the ground zero of his transformation, where he began to unearth his own beliefs.
Would he capitulate to the familiar pressures of the past, or would he risk it all for a future he believed could thrive amid authenticity? "Think about it," Ethan said softly, the allure of sincerity slipping into his tone. "If we align our business with genuine compassion, we can pioneer a new way of doing things. We could set a new standard and redefine success, one that fosters dialogue instead of division." His father's steely resolve wavered, if only for an instant. There was uncertainty, a kernel of doubt that budged beneath his hardened exterior. It wasn't that Ethan expected immediate acceptance. He was fighting a generational mentality. But it was enough of a crack that he could see a glimmer of possibility. Just then, the doorbell chimed, breaking the spell. Ethan's heart raced again. His next step remained uncharted. The call for engagement, likely from someone who demanded attention from the firm, could distract or delay the pivotal moment they shared. "Dad, please consider," Ethan urged again, knowing this conversation's vitality teetered on a precipice. Would he seize this critical exchange for advocacy, or would this moment dissipate under the weight of familial obligation? As he held his breath, a dangerous idea took hold in his mind. What if he called in others to witness this clash? But what would it mean for him to invite opinions from perspectives outside the echo chamber? The heart of the dilemma surged forth. "Fine," his father relented, but the air felt tense. "We'll discuss this later," Ethan cut him off. In that moment, he needed to plant his feet firmly on his ground of ownership. "No, Dad, I need to do this now." The stakes had never felt higher, and for the first time he was standing in affirmation of his belief, unfolding a path he could embrace as his own, albeit painfully. Would this lead to the breakthrough he desired, or would the unrelenting lash of history bind him again? As he grappled with the magnitude of his resolve and the churning anticipation of confrontation, Ethan felt a change brewing within him, signaling a readiness to stake his claim. He was hunting for truth. But as the door opened to reveal a delegation from the board, he understood he was not just confronting his father anymore, but challenging the very essence of who he had been taught to become. And with the board's entrance looming like thunderclouds, Ethan wondered if this would be the clash that would define him, or lead him into new obscurity. The door swung open, ushering in a wave of crisp air that seemed to carry with it the tension of impending judgments. The board members, impeccably dressed and radiating their own carefully curated versions of confidence, stepped into the living room as if it were a stage set for a performance. Their smiles were businesslike masks, capable of concealing their immediate thoughts. "Ethan!" a voice boomed, drawing attention. It was Mr. Klein, the oldest member of the board, his hands clasped as though prepared to address a group of students rather than a family matter. "We hope you're ready for a productive discussion." "Actually," Ethan interrupted, surprising himself, "we need to talk about something crucial first." The room went cold, the atmosphere shifting as if someone had flipped a switch. The delegation exchanged quick glances, uncertain of how to respond to this turbulence coming from someone they had often dismissed as the young heir, a title encased in both privilege and expectation. His father's eyes narrowed, the silence thickening as he braced for whatever indiscretion Ethan was daring to unleash. But the fire within Ethan only intensified. They were here now, and functionality meant nothing to him in this moment. He was past the point of ignoring the looming existential conflict that pierced every tense interaction like a well-aimed arrow. "I need to speak about our reputation," Ethan declared, trying to anchor his uncertainty with a steady tone. "And more importantly, the legacy we're building. I believe we have an opportunity to reshape how we engage with the world around us." "Your ideas sound noble, Ethan," Mr. Klein interjected with disdain, "but this is business, not a charity. We have shareholders' concerns to prioritize."
Exactly, Ethan shot back, feeling an unexpected rush of adrenaline. But what if prioritizing compassion doesn't mean diluting effectiveness? What if merging empathy with profit makes us stronger? Are you so afraid of innovation that you can't see the possibilities? His father's expression morphed into one of disbelief, a whirlwind of familial disappointment and a hint of alarm flickering in his eyes. For so long, Ethan saw only the model of success his father had defined: money, influence, and the relentless pursuit of a polished image. But here he stood, rooted deeper than before, defying the foundational principles that had amassed their wealth. "Now is not the time for this, Ethan," his father finally said, voice low as if a warning. "You're risking everything we've built." "Or what I'm risking is not enough," Ethan countered fiercely. "A legacy defined solely by financial gain risks erasing our humanity. Why are we so afraid of vulnerability? Why can't we stand for something more?" The board members watched the exchange unfold with a mix of bewilderment and fascination. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others appeared intrigued. Each glance exchanged was a silent reminder of the walls built around success and reputation that had dominated his family for generations. In the midst of this charged atmosphere, Ethan felt the surge of self-belief materialize within him. It was as if the truth of his convictions had taken shape beyond simple thoughts, taking form as resolute actions he was willing to champion. The stakes were elevated. He could no longer allow fear to dictate his voice or presence.
Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan turned once more toward the board. "I ask you all to consider a meeting where we engage with the communities around us, get to know their struggles and needs, connect with them instead of distancing ourselves behind polished facades, not just to rehabilitate our image, but perhaps to find our own purpose in the process." At that moment, he recognized the internal battle still raging within him. Would he stand strong against the waves of opposition that might crash upon him, or will he fall back again into the shadows of complacency? "A radical thought, son," Mr. Klein said, sensing the tide push against him. "The board will take your proposition under consideration." "Not just consideration," Ethan shot back, his pulse quickening. "A commitment. It's time we redefine who we are. It's far overdue." The quiet tension crackled around them, and as he stood in that moment, surrounded by those who held traditional power, Ethan wondered if his assertion would bring him liberation or expose him to greater vulnerability. His father's eyes bore into him, a storm brewing in their depths. Would this bold stand open a path to understanding between them, or would it end with Ethan shackled by the weight of his own defiance? With the board members beginning to whisper among themselves, Ethan suddenly realized that what lay ahead was a pivotal fork on his journey, one with the potential to unveil radical change or plunge him into further conflict. What he hadn't anticipated was the extent to which his own resolve would be put to the test. How far was he willing to go to uncover the truth of who he was? The answer appeared to loom just ahead, cloaked in uncertainty and the chance for ultimate transformation. And as the murmurs grew louder, creating a dissonance in the air, Ethan steeled himself once again. The true confrontation was still brewing, one that would reverberate through every aspect of his life. Would he embrace this new paradigm or remain entrenched in the shadows of inherited traditions? The board members' murmurs filled the air with a tangible unease, an almost electric buzz that matched Ethan's rapid heartbeat. Each whispered exchange felt like a ripple, threatening to disrupt the fragile balance he had teetered upon only moments before. Anticipation surged within him, fierce and primal. Would they resist change, or were they looking for a spark to ignite a dormant fire? A shadow of doubt flickered in his mind. Was he strong enough for this fight? The weight of expectation from his family felt heavier than a century-old legacy. His father's cold stare was a reminder of the stakes he was playing with. Yet, at the core, something unfamiliar began to bloom, a fresh, unyielding resolve. It whispered to him that perhaps the most profound rebellion wasn't merely against corporate norms, but against the silence that had long stifled his voice.
"Ethan," his father finally said, the tension in the room intensifying as all eyes shifted back to him. "We have built our success on a certain understanding of how business works. Your ideas, while interesting, could jeopardize our position. Or they could redefine it," Ethan replied, biting back the instinctive flinch at his father's disapproval. He was done seeking approval. He needed to advocate for what felt right, not what felt safe. What if pursuing deeper connections not only boosts our reputation, but also enhances our profitability? We cannot afford to underestimate the power of genuine relationship building. He could feel the board members' energy shift, doubtful, intrigued, skeptical.
Yet he sensed their challenge was not just with his ideas, but also with his audacity to voice them. Their discomfort was palpable, and he realized that this was the crux of the transformation he craved for himself. It wasn't merely about changing the company's approach, but also about changing how he viewed himself within that world. As silence descended again, Ethan turned to Mr. Klein, whose expression flickered between disdain and contemplation. "I propose we pilot a quarterly engagement program with local organizations. Let's not just be a name they see on a facade. Let's become a part of their narrative." Each word hung in the air, weighted with purpose. Mr. Klein frowned, but appeared to listen. "And once we open that door, how do we measure success? What guarantees can you provide?" Ethan inhaled deeply, a steadying breath to quell his rising anxiety. "Success won't be measured only in revenues, but in the narratives we develop and the loyalty we foster. This could position us as leaders in innovation, showing our dedication beyond profits." His own words caught him off guard, as if they were a revelation of self he had yet to fully grasp. He wasn't just fighting for a new strategy, he was fighting for a new identity. But would this revelation lead to an embrace or rejection from the very people who had shaped his outlook for so long? His internal dialogue swirled. What if he was wrong? What if they dismissed him entirely? The fear of failing loomed large, yet so did the yearning for authenticity in purpose and voice. It was imperative that he remained anchored, grounded in his mission, even if it cost him his standing. As murmurs crescendoed anew, Ethan approached the edges of a crucial decision, risking his professional future for the sake of his ideals, or retreating into the comfort of old ways. Yet here, amidst the tension, a sharp realization coursed through him. The fight itself, whether won or lost, was the true measure of his commitment to personal integrity. With a newfound clarity, he took a step towards the assembled board members, the fire of conviction fueling his resolve. "Let's move forward and set a timeline."
No more talk of consideration. Let's outline our commitment, set a framework, and measure our effectiveness with the benchmarks we establish. In that moment, within the charged atmosphere, Ethan had crossed a threshold. He felt the outlines of his identity sharpening against the contours of legacy. However, with power came vulnerability, and as he faced the unsteady terrain ahead, the question remained. Could he sustain this newfound momentum, or would he collapse under the pressure of tradition? His heart raced at the thought of what was to come. The conference room would either become a platform for his revolution or a tomb for his dreams. The tension in his shoulders reminded him that the fight for a genuine legacy was only just beginning. What he hadn't anticipated was the fierce resistance and unexpected alliances waiting in the wings. Would he be able to navigate the murky waters of tradition and innovation, or would he find himself swept into the currents of complacency once again? And as the whispers died, the board looked upon him, their expressions inscrutable. Ethan stood poised on the brink of transformation. What he did next would determine not only his future, but also the legacy written by his own hand. Ethan locked eyes with the board, the gravity of his stance rippling through the air. With every second that passed, he sensed the mixed emotions swirling among the members, curiosity intertwined with skepticism. He could feel the stakes shifting beneath him, the foundation of his ambition colliding with the expectations of those who had come before him. "Perhaps," he continued, pushing past his familiar self-doubt, "this is about more than profits or branding. This is about our humanity, our values as a company. It's about being genuine in an age where authenticity is often sacrificed for convenience." His voice grew stronger, the passion illuminating his words. It felt almost foreign to his previous approaches, to stir conviction rather than compliance. The board members exchanged glances, some even leaning in. Yet Ethan felt the tension of opposition lurking, specifically from Mr. Klein. He took a deep breath and braced himself. "I can present a risk management plan, along with scenarios of potential outcomes driven by our engagement levels. I believe the qualitative benefits will resonate far beyond what the spreadsheets will show." "Engagement doesn't pay the bills, Ethan," Mr. Klein countered, his tone edged with practiced condescension. "You're suggesting we divert resources toward a fuzzy initiative. Are you ready to gamble the company's future on such an abstract concept?" Ethan's heart quickened at the challenge. This was the moment he had prepared for, where the echoing voices of doubt faded, giving rise to his burgeoning resolve. "I'm not suggesting absolutes. I'm proposing a calculated risk."
Every significant shift in this industry has come through innovation, often stemming from the willingness to connect on a deeper level. An unexpected silence enveloped the room as Ethan considered Mr. Klein's expression. Perhaps he could be a catalyst for a more profound dialogue, even if initially resistant. What if he could coax transformation from the very oppositions set against him? Pushing his shoulders back, Ethan decided to pivot. What if I personally lead the initiative, report on progress, and ensure accountability? My commitment to this will show we're serious. The challenge hung in the air, his certainty hovering in counterbalance to Klein's dissent. The murmurs cracked open a space for possibility, and Ethan caught a glimmer of interest flickering amongst some of the board members. He pushed against the pressure of tradition and expectation, daring to imagine the energy of the room shifting. A determined fire blazed within him as he visualized a future where his ideals were woven into the very fabric of the corporate identity. Yet underlying excitement tugged relentlessly at his conscience. What would his father say if he heard Ethan asserting himself as a leader? Would he view it through the lens of rebellion, or could Ethan finally gain his respect? As the discussions ebbed and flowed, Ethan felt the edges of his confidence sharpening into focus. He was learning to navigate not just the corporate landscape, but the intricate nuances of his own identity. Each question posed by the board members forced him to confront his insecurities, revealing facets of his leadership he had yet to explore. By the time the meeting wound down, Ethan could sense a shift in the atmosphere, a slight crack in the facade of resistance. It wasn't complete acceptance, but he could feel curiosity, perhaps even a spark of admiration glimmering amongst the board. He realized he had started a journey, not just toward professional change, but toward discovering more authentic parts of himself. As the meeting concluded, Ethan stood, lingering in his seat, the room emptying around him. What if this had just scratched the surface? What if the next challenge unveiled would test the very principles he was beginning to articulate? The tension inside him swelled. The realization of deeper conflicts yet to reveal themselves chased away his euphoria. Though he had spoken boldly, the voices of tradition still whispered in the corners of his mind, each one urging caution and compliance. Disconnect remained palpable, and with it uncertainty about the future of his vision loomed large. Was he truly ready to face the ramifications of his choices? His heart thrummed in sync with his mind's turmoil as he faced the exit, one step closer to a precipice of compounded conflict. Would he be launched into a greater fight for alignment with his ideals, or would he find himself caught in nostalgic reveries of the past he was desperately trying to transcend?
As he stepped out into the cool air, the question lingered. How far was he willing to go for the sake of unveiling his true legacy? And what unexpected allies or adversaries awaited him on this path of self-discovery? Ethan walked through the glass doors, a gust of wind snapping him back into the reality outside. The chatter of passing pedestrians juxtaposed the silence of the boardroom, where he had just bared his ambitions. The weight of uncertainty pressed in on him with each step. Beyond the 20 floors of polished mahogany and boardroom steel lay a world vibrating with unfiltered opinions. He pulled out his phone, scrolling absent-mindedly through messages. No notifications from his father, something Ethan found both relieving and unsettling. Did he even want that conversation? He hesitated, remembering his father's expectations, a legacy built on unwavering convention. Ethan had battled a duality for years, the desire to break free from his father's shadow and the deep-seated yearning for approval. As he strolled along the bustling street, he felt an unusual sense of connection to the people around him. Each stranger carried their stories, their struggles, and amidst that ebb and flow, he wondered, could they too feel trapped beneath the weight of obligation? This reflection stirred an urgent recognition within him. His assertion at the meeting had pushed him further, but the underlying reason was more profound. It wasn't just corporate engagement, it was about crafting a narrative that resonated with humanity. Ethan pondered his next steps. Determined not to retreat into familiar territory, he decided to intentionally align his actions with the values he had begun to embrace. He turned sharply, heading to the office of the nonprofit organization he had loosely liaised with in the past. They focused on mentorship for young professionals, a realm he had previously dismissed as being too hands-off for his nature. But perhaps to nurture others was exactly what he needed to spark his own evolution.
Engagement could be born from reciprocity, a transaction of inspiration. Upon his arrival, he took a moment, experiencing the pleasant jolt of uncertainty. Acknowledging that he was stepping into a space of vulnerability, put into perspective the struggles of navigating his own aspirations while building others up. As he entered the office, the vibrant discussions of volunteers ignited an atmosphere of excitement, contrasting sharply with the sterile formality of his previous meeting. "Hi, Ethan, great to see you," a familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Marie, the director. Her enthusiasm was palpable. "We actually need more volunteers this week. You could definitely help us inspire a few of the mentees who look up to you." "Thanks, Marie. I'd love to jump in, but I was thinking more along the lines of leading something," he replied, surprising himself with the boldness of his statement.
Maybe something on leadership based on personal values? I could use the experience, and I know there's a hunger for genuine connection among them. Marie's eyes widened and she nodded vigorously. Absolutely! This could be so impactful and just what we need to shake things up a bit. As they positioned their actions between each other within the space of this initiative, Ethan uncovered an unstated truth about himself. Carrying the weight of another's expectation had primed him to implement that same style over his own. Enabling others to express their voice set the stage for him to understand his. These interactions promised a chance at self-exploration he hadn't anticipated. On the way home, the flickering feeling of fulfillment and trepidation coalesced, pushing thoughts of resistance to the background. Previously defining moments of his life seemed vivid as he viewed them through a lens of newfound appreciation. Each connection he had made, each formative experience, had contributed to the man he was becoming. Yet, just as excitement began to take root, doubts creeping back in reminded him of the challenges ahead. Mr. Klein's words echoed. Could entrepreneurship truly align with sincerity? He sensed a looming confrontation with heavier stakes than the last board meeting. What might they think if he took this risk? Would his confidence translate to his superiors, or would it further alienate him? With the conflicting emotions as his only compass, Ethan braced himself. This was merely the precursor to a deeper engagement that would test his willingness to expose his growing self. How far would his journey into authentic leadership take him? What battles would erupt on the path to his true identity? Ethan awoke the next morning with the weight of his decision still pressing down on him. He stared at the ceiling, time slipping by unnoticed. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting soft rays that highlighted the dust particles hovering in the air. Today marked his first meeting with the mentees at the nonprofit, a fresh chapter of vulnerability intertwined with the challenge of leadership. He stood before his mirror, meticulously adjusting his tie. As he practiced his speech, a familiar wave of anxiety crashed over him. Would they see through him? Would they sense his struggle to embrace this new role? Ethan needed to convey a message of empowerment without losing his own narrative in the process. Navigating through the city streets on his way to the office, he absorbed everything around him. The vibrant markets, the street performers animatedly engaging passersby, the sounds of laughter that pierced his thoughts. This urban cacophony ignited something deeper in Ethan, a budding realization that leadership wasn't just about authority, it was about resonance, fostering connections that uplift individuals and influence lives. When he entered the nonprofit office, the buzz of anticipation enveloped him like a warm embrace.
Marie was already there, coordinating the volunteers, her energy a delightful contrast to the cold, impersonal boardroom he had left behind. "Ethan, I'm so glad you made it," she greeted, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "The mentees are eager to meet you." As they gathered in the meeting room, Ethan felt a knot of apprehension tighten in his chest. The room was filled with an eclectic mix of aspiring professionals, each wearing a look of earnest curiosity. He could almost feel their hopes coiling around the thin threads of his own aspirations. "All right, everyone, let's give a warm welcome to Ethan," Marie announced, her voice ringing out with a confidence he yearned to embody. As applause filled the room, Ethan stood at the front, his heart racing. A moment of silence fell. He had to start speaking. He had to connect with these young minds. "Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here," he began, the words spilling out with unanticipated fluidity. "Today, I want to share some ideas on leadership, specifically how it connects to personal values. But before we get into that, I want you to know that I'm here to listen more than to speak." Immediately, the atmosphere shifted. Questions began to surface, minds opening up, and he could see those familiar flickers of uncertainty in their eyes, mirrored reflections of his own. It ignited a spark in him. Each interaction became less about self-judgment and more about shared experiences. We all encounter challenges that make us question who we are and what we stand for. "I've been struggling with that myself," he admitted, generating a ripple of empathy in the room. "This isn't just a lecture. I want us to tackle these feelings together." As he facilitated a discussion on values and personal journeys,
Ethan instinctively became attuned to the nuances of the conversation. He felt their stories resonate within him, tapping into a well of understanding he hadn't realized was there. For the first time, he wasn't just listening, he was engaged, his heart in every word. When the meeting concluded, the mentees approached him, eager to express their thoughts and feelings, grateful for the openness he had fostered. One by one, they shared their experiences, breaking down the barriers he had previously erected around himself. Sparks of transformation ignited within him, illuminating a path he hadn't known he would walk this day. But as the excitement began to settle, seeds of doubt germinated once more. Would this connection, this newfound aspect of leadership, sustain in the corporate world, where ruthlessness often prevailed? How would Mr. Klein view his unconventional approach? Filled with both pride and apprehension, Ethan realized the depth of this internal conflict was only just beginning. Bringing authentic leadership into a world shadowed by expectations would not come without repercussions.
In the stillness of the evening air, he stood outside the nonprofit, the city humming with life around him. The confrontation with his own identity had only just begun, and he questioned what the depths of these revelations would unveil. Would he be able to balance authenticity with the harsh realities of his professional surroundings? Would choices rooted in genuine connection ultimately align with the expectations that bound him? As he breathed in the cool air, he felt the tension of the next challenge unwound. This journey was not a sprint, but a marathon of self-discovery. What new truths awaited him as he stepped back into the corporate landscape? What hurdles would he have to leap over to reclaim his narrative? The next morning, Ethan awoke with a determined clarity. The remnants of yesterday's doubts flickered in his mind like distant stars, but the strength he'd ignited during the meeting lingered. Today would be different. He dressed meticulously. The tie around his neck now felt like an emblem of purpose rather than a noose of expectations. As he rode the elevator to his office, thoughts of the nonprofit flooded his consciousness. What he'd felt there, genuinely connecting with those mentees, seemed worlds away from the sterile business environment that awaited him. The elevator dinged, jolting him back as the door slid open to reveal his floor. Stepping into the stark white walls of his corporate sanctuary was jarring. The disinfected smell lingered, a constant reminder of the soulless machine that chugged along within its confines. He greeted his colleagues with a polite nod, but their entrapment in their digital devices felt suffocating. Suddenly, the memories of laughter and hope hung in stark contrast against this backdrop. Ethan couldn't help but wonder how he could integrate that atmosphere into this world. The morning passed with familiar mundanity, but as the clock inched towards noon, Mr. Klein summoned him into his office. A nervous rill cascaded down Ethan's spine. He had shared a glimpse of vulnerability yesterday. Now he must face the resistance of traditional corporate metrics, a place where performance often overshadowed genuine engagement. "Ethan, I want to talk about your project on employee development," Mr. Klein started, his voice crisp. This was the moment to stand firm. "Of course," Ethan replied, deliberately keeping his tone steady. "I've noticed you've been meeting with individuals at that nonprofit. I hope you realize that our bottom line requires results and efficiency, not just loose discussions about personal values," Mr. Klein asserted, his eyes narrowing slightly. Ethan swallowed, feeling a mix of defiance and self-reflection. The corporate world he had navigated for years molded him into someone who feared dissent. Yet if he truly aspired to be a leader, this was the very platform to assert his new insights.
"I believe personal development can enhance productivity," Ethan responded, the words flowing out much more firmly than intended. Mr. Klein raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. "Explain." In that moment, Ethan felt the transformation brewing within him. He shared the experiences of the mentees, their eagerness, their struggles, how issues of authenticity had influenced their performance. The conversation started to shift as he articulated his belief that connecting on a personal level could invigorate collaboration and inspire innovation. There was risk in what he proposed, a risk he had to be willing to embrace. The meeting took a turn when Mr. Klein's expression softened, if only for a moment. "You really think this will work?" he asked, contemplating the unorthodox idea. In that space, Ethan saw a flicker of something he hadn't encountered in his boss before, a willingness to reconsider. He nodded, feeling more resolute. "It has to. I think it's essential." As he left the meeting, exhilaration mixed with fear coursed through him. Ethan was stepping beyond previous limitations, but he could feel the massive wheels of corporate expectations still pressing against his newfound resolve.
If he failed to instill this transformation, there would be consequences, one that could lead to dismissal rather than leadership. Later that afternoon, he sought out his former mentor, Dave, who had worked in the corporate world and knew its inner workings. When Ethan expressed his frustrations and ambitions, he saw his old mentor lean in, intrigued. "You've got potential, but be careful. Authenticity can often be seen as weakness in this environment." Those words unsettled him. Could his integrity be misconstrued? The idea ignited a surge of determination. He wanted to prove that authenticity was, in fact, a strength. The challenge ahead was clear, navigating the rigid corporate hierarchy while staying true to himself. As evening settled, Ethan stood at the window, staring out at the city's skyline. Shadows danced as the sun dipped below the horizon. He felt torn between two worlds, each brimming with distinct challenges. Would embracing authenticity truly lead to success? Could he shift perspectives and transcend expectations? His heart raced as he pondered his next steps. The risk he faced wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal, confronting the very fabric of who he wanted to be. He resolved to forge ahead with courage, ready to face the consequences head-on. But another question loomed in his mind. How much transformation would the corporate world endure before it retaliated? The path to self-discovery was fraught with uncertainty, but perhaps it was time for him to test what resilience truly meant in the face of overwhelming odds. What bridges would he need to build, and what fires would he have to walk through? Ethan Cooper stood at the threshold of his office, gazing out at the skyline that once felt removed from him.
Each building told a story of ambition, success, and, most importantly, the price that often accompanied them. The transformation he had begun was no longer an abstract concept. It was a concrete reality unfolding with every decision he made. Today was pivotal. As he walked into the conference room, he could sense the weight of scrutiny from the board members gathered for the quarterly meeting. With his father sitting at the head of the table, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. He had spent the last few weeks drafting a new initiative focused on community engagement and personal empowerment, and it was time to present it. He took a steadying breath, his heart pounding, and prepared to unveil what he believed could reshape their corporate ethos. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady as he swept his gaze across the room. "Today, I want to discuss not just our current standing as a firm, but how we can ensure our legacy is one anchored in authentic relationships and community involvement." The board members exchanged skeptical glances. Mr. Klein's jaw tightened, a sign of both resistance and curiosity. Ethan recognized this familiar tug of war, yet today his resolve felt immovable. "I propose a strategic partnership with local organizations," he continued, "not merely for optics or public relations, but to truly engage with the communities we impact. As a result, we'll foster genuine connection, loyalty, and a renewed sense of purpose." Ethan could see the skepticism on his father's face. "And what makes you think this will appeal to our shareholders? By prioritizing community engagement, we may jeopardize our bottom line," he countered. Ethan leaned into the challenge. "What if I told you that companies which prioritize social responsibility see greater long-term profitability? It's not just about numbers, it's about creating a narrative, a story that aligns our corporate practices with the values we profess." In that moment, a flicker of realization sparked within the board. They were being invited not into a debate about finances, but into a dialogue about integrity. As the discussion evolved, Ethan demonstrated how inclusive leadership breeds innovation, appealing to both the human aspect of business and the numbers that drove their success. As the meeting veered toward the logistics of Ethan's proposal, he felt a shift in momentum. His words resonated, igniting a fire of curiosity that sparked into hesitant approval. In a matter of moments, his father's expression softened, a sign of acceptance rather than disapproval. "All right, let's evaluate this initiative. I see potential," Mr. Klein declared. A wave of relief washed over Ethan. He had stepped beyond his father's shadow. The acceptance from Klein marked a personal victory, the beginning of a new chapter where integrity and ambition walked hand in hand. Later that day, Ethan found himself in his favorite cafe, unwinding with a cup of coffee. The barista, a young woman named Sarah, approached him. "Ethan, I heard about your presentation today. Everyone's talking about it. It's incredible how you're changing the narrative." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket. Recognition from an outsider felt different, validating the work he had done to break the boundaries of his privilege. Thank you, Sarah. I couldn't have done it without support. As he reflected on his journey, Ethan recognized that the real transformation had come from within. He had faced his fears and insecurities, crafted strategies rooted in empathy, and stood against the very values he had been raised to uphold. In the days that followed, the initiative began to take shape. The firm collaborated with local organizations, fostering mentorship programs and community service initiatives. Ethan found himself leading workshops, reaching out to younger generations and ensuring their voices were heard. Each connection strengthened his resolve and reshaped what leadership meant for him. He was no longer just an heir to a legacy. He was an architect of a new narrative, one defined by compassion, action, and truth. As he stood before a diverse group of mentees sharing their stories, he felt an overwhelming sense of belonging and purpose. For the first time, he didn't just see numbers or business potentials. He saw faces, hopes, and dreams intertwined with his own. The culmination of Ethan's journey became evident when he received an award for community impact. The attention wasn't just recognition, it symbolized the years of development, courage, and unwavering commitment to authenticity. Standing before his peers, he accepted the accolade, but it was not a reflection of his achievements alone. It represented the collective stories belonging to everyone who had inspired him along the way. In that moment, he felt complete. The realization washed over him. True fulfillment emerged not from financial success or familial approval, but from standing firm in one's values and forging genuine connections. The tension between expectation and authenticity had transformed, not into compliance, but into a vibrant blend of purpose and identity. Ethan understood now. The journey of self-discovery was a continual evolution, marked by righteous choices and the willingness to embrace both vulnerability and strength. He would no longer be bound by the shadows of privilege. Instead, he would forge a legacy built upon the foundations of empathy and courage. This was the moment he had been waiting for, a triumph stemming from both personal growth and courageous confrontation. Now, dear audience, it's your turn to take a step towards transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion.
Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative journey. You need to subscribe now, because this is the moment to embrace change and inspire others. Don't wait even one more second to share.